Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week it's Robocop and Hancock, a cinematic superhero team-up. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have 2 good movies, the other 2 bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I am Thomas Mariani, and the Thomases are podcasting tonight.
And I am Adam Thomas, and get the hell away from me, man!
Oh, you didn't like my new look, Adam, out of the toxic waste dump? I thought it looked great. Such an improvement.
I mean, honestly, I didn't notice much of a difference.
I guess I'll just wait for another Clarence Boddicker truck to come over and run me over as I wait for.
Turn you into soup.
I mean, it's more water, honestly.
Yeah, that's true.
There's no real gore there. They used all the gore before that point. It's just water. But welcome, everyone, to a very special episode of Double-Edged Double Bill, where basically, if you're new, every week Adam and I pick a good and a bad feature based on us, 2 movies that each of us has at the end of every episode. And today is a very crucial day because we're planning on releasing this I believe either day or at least week of our 4th year anniversary. Adam, can you fucking believe it?
No, I mean, I can believe it in the way that, like, I believe waking nightmares are real. And, things like that. Like, in the way that I believe there's true evil in the world. So yeah, I guess I can believe it.
Like, in an agnostic sense, you believe that this has happened and has been happening to you. It's kind of like one of those weird existential nightmares, like I have no mouth, but I must scream.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I get that. But yeah, we've been doing this for 4 years now, and it's been a very interesting ride, back and forth, lots of twists and turns along the way. But with the previous anniversaries we've done, we've kind of set a theme of sorts, because the very first episode we released, which was on May 10th of 2018, which I realized this day is the 4-year anniversary we're putting this out, because it's Tuesday, May 10th, 2022. Yes, to the day. And that we did Marvel as a topic. Generally, we did an MCU movie and a non-MCU movie. Then on the 1st year anniversary in 2019, we did the MCU as a topic. On the 2nd anniversary, we did graphic novel adaptations. And then on the 3rd anniversary, we did non-Marvel or DC adaptations as a topic. So we've stuck to sort of like the superheroics or comic book related ephemera. And we're doing something a bit different with this one, because we are doing superheroes as a topic, but it's specifically superheroes created for the silver screen. So cinematic created superheroes, which is in our modern superhero verse that we have. That's like, either Marvel or DC or some of the other things in between. There's not as many like just created for the cinema superheroes out there.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you really get into it and look, I mean, there's been some pretty significant ones, but it's a weird little sort of offshoot genre, the cinematic superheroes. There's some real fucking goofy shit involved in this.
Well, and I'm curious, Adam, you're a comic book guy.
Yeah.
What do you think makes like sort of work? What's the big distinctive difference to you?
You're not beholden to any source material. So therefore you get to kind of just do what you want. There's not going to be, sort of, I hate to put it this way, but like the fanboy culture shitting on it. Or, well, that's not exactly how it was when I was a baby. Or whatever the fuck. It's just, you got more freedom to make what you want and really sort of potentially do something really special and unique.
Yeah, though I would also say the bigger thing is, like, with a comic book, like, it's literally your imagination only stretches as far as the page, really, and your artistic sort of limitations, as opposed to if you create something for cinema, like, there is an inherent limitation you can have with that particular thing. Obviously, right now, if you were to create a new superhero out of the blue, modern CG and stuff like that could probably benefit you, but especially some of the, like, one of the older movies we're talking about, There were specific limits that kind of made that movie work as well as it did.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yes. So let's go ahead and start bringing up the two movies that we picked at the end of our last episode, though one of them was not picked by us necessarily as much as our loyal Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/DETBpod. More on that later as we get into the weeds of the episode. But we ended up with your bad pick, Adam, which was Hancock.
Yep.
And then my good pick, which the patrons voted for, over at patreon.com/DETBpod, which was Robocop. So we'll get into both those movies, though first we're starting off with Hancock.
Hancock's latest act of so-called heroics has once again enraged city officials.
I do public relations.
People don't like you, Hancock.
I look like I care what people think.
I think you're wasting your time with this guy.
Pulled some stuff up on YouTube. Everybody remembers Walter, the gray whale. He was stuck on the beach. Along comes Hancock.
Oh my God.
I don't even remember that.
Greenpeace does. You're a superhero, for God's sakes. People should love you.
How are we gonna do that, Ray?
You have a calling. You're a hero, Hancock. You're gonna be miserable the rest of your life until you accept that.
Hancock! I need you to end this.
Hancock is down. He looks hurt.
That's it. Make it look hard.
So Hancock came out July 2nd, 2008, from director Peter Berg, and writers, at least the two credited ones, are Vincent No, who wrote the original script. This was based on, called Tonight He Comes, which is an interesting title for a variety of reasons, which was a big script that went around Hollywood for a while, went to various different hands, and the main person who's credited with rewriting it is someone named Vince Gilligan, who you might know as the guy who, after this movie came out, he decided, like, I'm going to go ahead and try and do my TV project, little thing that might, do well on AMC, American Movie Classics, are doing TV shows now. Maybe it'll work out. No, who would watch Breaking Bad?
Yeah, I haven't.
That's true. The culture follows Adam, so no one has watched that show. One season wonder, didn't go anywhere, no spinoffs.
Right, yeah. Has anybody even heard about it?
No, I don't know. It was a show that just had so much potential, but didn't get to really spread its wings that far now. But this movie, as I mentioned, was based on the script that was so popular, and it went through a lot of interesting different developments. It was originally the original script was apparently much darker, had a much more R-rated tone. Hancock was more of the villain of the piece. Apparently involved him kidnapping the character who would become Charlize Theron's character, who was not at all superpowered to any degree in that script. And Peter Berg basically compared to a superhero version of Leaving Las Vegas, which sounds like a big blockbuster tentpole that Will Smith would clearly want to do.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Right. And a lot of directors were attached to it, like Tony Scott and Jonathan Mostow and Michael Mann. Michael Mann is still a producer on the particular movie. And so all those different cooks ended up resulting in Hancock as a Will Smith vehicle. And Adam, this was your bad pick, so why do you feel it deserves to be a bad pick?
Oh, mainly because it's fucking stupid. The idea of this sort of depressed alcoholic, given up really sort of superhero, it's a cool idea, especially when he's basically Superman, he's super strong, can fly, and vulnerable, all this stuff. I like the idea of Superman giving up and just kind of doing it and helping people when it sort of suits him, at that moment. But then it just goes from that into just really, really wacky stuff. He doesn't like being called asshole for some reason. He puts himself in prison. The whole thing with the reveal of the Charlize Theron character especially is so stupid. There's not really a real villain to the movie either. I mean, you got, Eddie Marzan, but you got Eddie Marzan and two guys who shoved their heads up each other's asses in prison.
The greatest villains of all.
Greatest villains of all. And then the note it ends on too is ridiculous with what he does with the moon or whatever. It's just it's a movie populated by just generally unlikable people. There's not one character in this movie. Even Bateman, I don't really care for. Like, he's just sort of manipulative and using, the Hancock character for his own successes. Like, it's a movie populated by unlikable characters and it just stupid writing decisions, just really bad, which I'm assuming rewrites and things like that. And, not for nothing, Peter Berg is not that great of an auteur as far as a director to me. Like, his movies, it's not that they're not competently made most of the time. It's just there's nothing to them. They just all kind of the same, just generic action sort of heavy movies, and this is definitely a pure example of that.
With Hancock, the biggest trouble is that, like, I see so much potential in that idea, and I think that's what really attracted people to that original script, was what, like you mentioned, like, a guy who has all the same powers as, like, a Superman, but he's a drunk who just, like, lives on the street and doesn't, like, really have a lot of motivation to do stuff, and when he does, he just causes a lot of damage. There's a lot of fascinating potential to that story, and I think the movie occasionally brushes up against, like, what would work as sort of, like, a dark satire of, like, a superhero movie. There's interesting bits and pieces there to that. But the trouble is that, because, like, you mentioned, like, so many people came in and rewrote the script, and apparently, like, Peter Berg has said as much that, like, the various different forces with, like, Will Smith's people, and, like, the various different writers, and Berg himself, and all these different clashing creative people, it's literally a big case of, like, too many cooks in the kitchen. Of just, like, too many different creative voices trying to decide, like, oh, this should be this, this, and this. And the movie is a great example of what you get when that happens. Where just, like, every 10 to 15 minutes, it feels like it changes tone in such bizarre ways. But not in a way that, like, feels like, oh, this is, like, daring and subversive and interesting. It just feels like a fucking mess. That's the big thing, is, like, it's such a weird, messy movie that I'm just kind of frustrated by watching. Because it's just like, damn, there's so much potential in this idea, and it gets squandered on various different weird pushes and pulls with the story.
Just the idea of what the sort of Will Smith Charlize Theron relationship is, that they were once, gods basically, and that they're doomed to always sort of find each other, but when they do, they lose their powers. And it's such a sloppily, messily written idea that even in that, the big twist reveal moment of the movie, of the entire script, is just really sort of haphazardly handled.
But I feel like there's even potential in that idea of, like, basically, like, immortal beings with superpowers that, like, meet up. It doesn't need to happen at, like, the hour mark of this movie, pretty much.
Right, yeah, and also when it does happen, it's, half-assed done. Like, when they're in the hospital and stuff, and he's, getting killed and stuff, and yet she's, like, fine, and then it flips, and then it's just, they have a cool idea, but they don't really know how to carry it off. It's really stupid. Like, it's not stupid, like you said. I think there is a cool idea there, interesting idea, but, like, to reiterate what you said, to introduce it at the hour mark of this movie and completely change sort of what you've been doing for the previous hour till now, it just feels lazy and tacked on at that point. Let's not forget the weird attempts at, like, almost like college level humor, like the orgasm stuff with Hancock.
We should emphasize that's in the unrated cut of the movie.
Yeah,
right. Like, that was available. I'm like, oh, I haven't seen this cut before. It's like 10 minutes longer, and that's, like, the big scene that's, like, different, where Hancock takes a lady home to his trailer, and they have sex, but really it's just, like, she's completely clothed. And when he orgasms, he just has, like, holes that pop out of the trailer's roof.
Like, it's like he's shooting a gun off inside.
Right, and there's no ejaculate of any kind. It's just air holes, basically. It's so weird. It's like, why is this even any version? Why'd you shoot this? This isn't
right. Right, completely agree. And like I said, then the stuff with Eddie Marsan's character, where he gets his hand cut off and the weird accent he's doing the whole movie, the two guys' heads in prison. It's just a lot thrown in haphazardly that just, like you said, ultimately makes for just a really confusing movie. Like, what were they doing here? You had such a simple idea. You could tell, oh, we got to make it darker. Oh, no, let's make it more funny. No, darker. No, funnier. No, romance. What?
Right, I think someone like the Jason Bateman character who you were talking about is, like, the biggest example of that to me, where it's just like, oh, he's doing this to benefit his own gains, but really, the movie doesn't want to go that far with the character. He should be, like, a slick, asshole dude who Bateman could play perfectly. He's done that before. Just like a fucking smarmy asshole, just like, hey, I can help you get back on top, Hancock. That would be an interesting character to bounce off of Hancock, and if anything, should have been more like the villain of your story. Like, the villain of the story should
absolutely.
be like an Eddie Marzan. Maybe he can be like a villain for him to face off against. But like, I think the movie is at its height when it has that scene where after like Hancock's been in prison for a bit, then he's called upon by the like police chief of New York City to be like, hey, you got to help us out with this like big bank robbery. That whole bank robbery scene, I think, is like the exact tone I wish the whole movie was at, where it's Hancock coming in as like this big superhero moment, but he's still just kind of like half-assing it. And he just doesn't, like, particularly the bit when he's walking by as, like, people are shooting off a bunch of guns, and he's just like, hey, everybody, yeah, I'm here. And, like, he's impervious to all the bullets. So it's just, like, things exploding behind him, like, the fucking glass and the cars and everything. That's a really fun set piece that I'm just like, why wasn't this, like, the whole tone of the movie? This is exactly what you should be going for.
Yeah, I completely agree. That was, the fun stuff. The actual stuff that, you would want to see in a superhero movie, and I do like the idea of him, having to sort of reform
and even like his suit looks like it's a parody of like the X-Men suits. There's like actual satire that's in that.
Yeah, it's gotta be, and that would really work. And yeah, having the Jason Bateman character sort of constantly make him do things he doesn't want to do, and really sort of exploit him would make for a much better film. Instead, like we've said, you get a half hour to an hour of one thing, and then they instantly change it into something else. And it's almost tonal whiplash all over the place.
When I saw this initially, I just felt like, oh man, that first hour is so fun. And then the Charlize stuff like makes it like just completely fall apart. Like, even in that first hour, there is still dumb stuff. Like, you mentioned the whole thing where, like, Hancock literally puts one prisoner up another prisoner's ass. And they play the Sanford and Son theme for some reason?
Uh-huh.
What was that needle drop? That's so weird. Why that specific needle drop?
I have no idea. It is just ultimately frustrating. Like, I'm completely just frustrated by this movie. I remember the trailers being kind of cool. The poster with his face with those kind of wacky sunglasses and the hat with the the Phoenix logo or whatever it is on it.
And even like that opening sequence, there's a lot of fun to that.
It's fun.
Just like, I gotta do this, even though the effects have not aged.
Oh my god.
No.
Outrageously dated.
Right. And then also there is some unfortunate, I think, like both homophobia there, but mainly racism with like all the guys who are in the car and everything. There's a bit of that as well, even in this earlier part of the movie. But like that's a cool sequence to just establish like, oh, he can save the day, but he's a reckless idiot who's just doing stupid shit all the time. And I wish also I agree that it had been in the hands of a different director, because you can tell, despite like, Tony Scott passing on this feels like Peter Berg kind of attempting to approximate a Tony Scott or even a bit of a Michael Bay in terms of like the color palette and like certain shots. It feels like, oh, he wants to make that big summer blockbuster action movie look, but Peter Berg isn't nearly talented a director to do that. It doesn't also help that you're doing that with Will Smith, who had starred in both two Michael Bay heightened action movies and also a Tony Scott heightened action movie previous to this.
Yeah, right.
But that's also an interesting thing with like the Will Smith of it all. Obviously, recent events with Will Smith have made things a bit different since the last time we talked about him. But I think this is a very crucial point in his career, because 2008 is both this and 7 Pounds. And those, I think, both kind of represent where, like, this movie was very successful and made $629 million. And I feel like it's also the last big Will Smith 4th of July movie. Because after this, and 7 Pounds, especially that movie's huge failure, he didn't make a movie for 4 years until, like, Men in Black 3 came out in 2012. And in that middle part, he was trying to develop Jaden Smith's blockbuster career that didn't ultimately happen. Because Jaden wasn't that interested in actually becoming a star, despite how much Will really wanted that to happen. But I think, this feels like the last sort of vestige of that career. And it also feels like it's Smith kind of trying to get in on the superhero game at that time, where it's just like, oh, well, Spider-Man's being successful and the Batman movies are very successful. How about I have my own superhero project that'll become a big, massive franchise? And while this did very well, the sequel's been in such weird development hell for the last, like, fucking 12 years or so, it's probably never happening. So it feels just sort of like a weird point where, like, this could have launched a completely different part of his career that just ended up, like, really fizzling out.
Will Smith has always been sort of a hit and miss for me. I don't think he's probably ever been better than he was in, say, the first Men in Black or Independence Day, or maybe even like the first Bad Boys. I would say were probably the best Will Smiths for me. Then he got, into more the drama fare, which is fine because he does have the chops, I guess. I never really got into like Pursuit of Happiness or those ones, but he was so quickly thrust into stardom post Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or even during. And I do believe a lot of it's by his own accord, naturally, but it just, the market was so saturated with him for so long. And I think by the time we got to this point with Hancock and 7 Pounds and things like that, it just became more of the same sort of performances. There wasn't a lot. It ended up being not a lot of variations at all. I mean, to the point to where when anybody even impersonates Will Smith, there's a couple catchphrases that he uses in every movie for the most part. The woos or the, welcome to Earth or time to save the day world or something like that.
Well, he was a movie star. I mean, he's playing on his movie star persona. That's what he did.
No, he did. Yeah, but it got stale for me personally.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it worked very well in terms of like his career because that's why he was Mr. 4th of July for so long. Like from Independence Day to this point, that's like a solid decade or so point. He rarely made a movie that flopped that hard. Like I think 7 Pounds like was the first movie that like massively flopped. Even like Wild Wild West, despite it being like the big embarrassing point of his career at that time, like was still extremely successful. Despite that, and I think if anything, this feels like it's also kind of at, like I mentioned, like, oh, the superhero craze was starting to really build up. This is the same summer as both Iron Man and The Dark Knight. And I think that gap really was crucial to, like, Smith, because in that gap from, like, 2008 to 2012, the superhero massive thing started really building in even more earnest, to the point where by the time he does Men in Black 3, that summer, like it completely flops compared to like the Avengers and even the Dark Knight Rises that particular summer.
Yeah. Well, I think Men in Black 3 was kind of destined to flop, to be honest with you.
Well, that's the thing. A worse movie like Men in Black 2 made like so much fucking money. Like that was the thing where even I agree with you that I don't think quality-wise he was that consistent during that entire period, but there was a point where like he was like doomed to never fail. Like, it was constant just thing, like, he would not fail no matter how shitty the movie was.
I Robot, anybody?
Or even, like, a small drama like Pursuit of Happiness made hundreds of millions of dollars, because that's how successful that dude was.
Yeah.
Like, even, like, right before this was I Am Legend, which I think is his second most successful movie.
And it's terrible. It's terrible.
There's elements of the movie that I think are really great. When the dog dies, that movie starts really falling apart. Really crucially. But anyway, I think there's, I think that's the most interesting sort of legacy of a Hancock, is that it feels like it's kind of the last vestige of that, but as an original superhero movie, as sort of like an interesting take on the superhero genre, it does really flop apart with, like, we can't emphasize enough that, like, once the Charlize Theron thing kicks off in earnest, it does feel like it's a completely different movie. Like, it's this big, massive, like, action superhero drama movie.
Even to the point where she completely changes. Like, her makeup, her, even almost her tone of speech, everything, which I get, like, maybe she was putting on, sort of a facade.
I will say the unrated cut, I think, does a better job of conveying sort of like what she's hiding. There's a lot more shots up and close of Charlize kind of like realizing like, oh shit, he's going to reveal all this. This is going to completely fucking fall apart. I wish that was in more of the movie. And more important, that even when we got that reveal, there was at least like some consistency with the tone. Really the most consistent thing that carries over is that you mentioned the whole thing with the asshole remark, that like basically it's a ripoff of like Martin McFly's problem in the sequels to Back to the Future.
Yeah.
People call him chicken. It's totally just that. Like he has that with that, and she has that with being called crazy. And like that's their hugest character flaw after a certain point.
Yeah. And that, and two more things I really kind of want to spotlight. One is the stuff with the kid from Rob Zombie's Halloween. Like, okay, I don't know if that Hancock should be throwing kids up into the space, basically, but whatever.
I mean, I don't mind that if they stick with him being like that big of an asshole and actually have an interesting arc by the time the movie finishes off, right?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Well, that's most of this movie, isn't it? Like, there's, cool things with no payoff. But, and also, when did Jason Bateman's character kind of notice that Charlize Theron hasn't aged?
The bigger trouble really is just that, like, they have a lot of sort of this background interesting stuff, like that scene that's at the one restaurant where Hancock reveals his whole backstory about, like, I woke up 80 years ago and I didn't have any memory and I'd never aged. Like, having that, and also the comparison with, like, Jason Bateman talking about, like, oh, I was a single dad after my wife died and she just came right out of the blue. Like, it's a problem of, like, he doesn't really question any of that stuff, because Jason Bateman, especially after that scene, is such a fucking cipher for the movie. Like, he only comes back to, like, basically hit Eddie Marzan at a certain point so Will Smith can leave. Like, that's all his function is for the last, like, half hour of the fucking movie.
Yeah, or to, see them on the street and realize that it's Charlize Theron and Will Smith fighting, not, when they're showing them on full television. He doesn't notice.
And carry around their child, of course, who has to witness all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it sucks.
Is there anything you enjoyed, though, about Hancock in there, Adam? Anything else that we haven't mentioned that you kind of had fun with?
I mean, like you said, there's the few moments that we sort of mentioned that are fun, like the bank robbery scene. The opening scene has some fun bits. The CGI is terrible.
I kind of like, there's one thing we didn't mention, like there's a whole sequence where Jason Bateman is showing Hancock, like, okay, here's all the stuff that you did that would cause people to be, like, upset with you. And there's one where, like, there's a beached whale that he just throws into the middle of the ocean. She's like, which is like, that's fun. Or, like, when he's, like, he apparently, like, saved a bunch of people out of a burning building and he goes over to an ice cream truck and just steals ice cream while he's burning up. Basically, like, there's fun bits like that. It's just glimpses, unfortunately.
Right, I think that's the problem. I mean, again, with the whole movie in general, there's all these cool little bits that, oh, this could be awesome. I wish they lean into this more. But unfortunately, it's just, this movie is nothing but wasted potential.
I guess those are pretty solid final thoughts, Adam, because I don't know if you have much else to add.
Best movie ever made, man.
Of course.
10 out of 10.
But yeah, I mean, I generally agree. I think the trouble is, we mentioned the whole Will Smith thing earlier. We've talked about Will Smith previously, where, like, when I was a kid, Will Smith was, like, the movie star. He was the guy where was just like, this is, like, the most charismatic, charming person. And I think this movie's biggest cultural legacy is just the fact that it feels like it's the bookend of that particular era of Will Smith. Like, I can't do any wrong. And then that break happened, and then a lot of wrong things kept happening for the next 10 years. Some things where he was still successful, but a lot of wrong things after that. And I think that's sort of the tragedy, is that, like, this could have been, at the very least, like, either the most interesting, weird blockbuster from this era of Will Smith, or it could have been, like, a fascinating start to a completely different franchise that could have kept his success kind of going after a certain point. This could have been, like, his Mission Impossible thing to kind of, like, parallel him to another one of the few stars that gets movies made right now, Tom Cruise. But unfortunately, this just ends up kind of, like, flopping around with so many fascinating ideas that are just dismantled by having too many creative voices in the kitchen that just ultimately degraded into a fascinating what could have been story, as opposed to, a great movie. If anything, you know what? This movie has at least got some cultural cachet. This is a great example of a movie I would love to see remade, because there's a good idea. And I would just like somebody to actually harness that potential and make a good movie out of it. This is a rare movie where, like, no, remake this. There's a good idea here. You can actually make something good out of it if you have a single creative voice to kind of funnel into something interesting. If we're going to remake things...
No, I agree. Remake things that had potential, but I wouldn't want to see this remade as, another feature and stuff. Do a cool TV series or something with this. But yeah, I guess so. I wouldn't mind seeing something like this catch a remake. There's a really cool idea here. It's just, now with the Peacemakers and the Guardians of the Galaxies and all that, and the Suicide Squads of the world, we've kind of gotten this sort of story again and again and again.
I would argue you could get something more subversive than even those movies.
Well, I'm saying we've gotten the disenfranchised sort of heroes already now several times over.
I think there's something you could do with this. I think if anything,
why don't you finance it then?
Well, it just so happens I have $40 million.
And I'm gonna dump it all into a Hancock.
Oh boy, my money's on Hancock, baby. Hancock 2025.
Hell yeah, starring Herbie Hancock. I know it's a terrible idea. He's really old, but
look, this is my creative vision. I think Herbie Hancock is the perfect person. It's not just because of the names.
I caught him in Godspell off Broadway. He was phenomenal.
We have a very different movie to talk about now, Adam. One might argue a better movie than Hancock. I don't know. Hot take. we're going to be talking about the original 1987 film, Robocop.
We've got to volunteer. The body is on the way.
All Detroit has a cancer. Cancer is crime.
As you know, we've entered into a contract with the city to run local law enforcement. We get the best of both worlds. Onboard computer-assisted memory and a lifetime of on-the-street law enforcement programming.
Murphy, it's you.
Go get him, boy.
Thank you. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. Anything you say may be used against you.
You better back up, pal!
Your move, creep.
The future of law enforcement. Robocop.
Thank you for your cooperation.
So Robocop came out July 17th, 1987, from director Paul Verhoeven, from an original script by Ed Neumeyer and Michael Miner. And this was a movie that, came out in 1987, was a big surprise success, did very well. It sort of created a new pop culture figure in the zeitgeist. And Adam, I think it's no secret, if anybody's been longtime followers of ours, they know that we're both pretty big fans of this movie. Would you concur with that sentiment? Are you a big fan of RoboCop, Adam?
I think RoboCop's the best movie to come out of the 80s. So, yes, I definitely am. I think RoboCop is absolute sci-fi action sleaze perfection.
So you hate it. Got it. Terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's not Hancock good.
Right. It is not Hancock
It's
good.
close.
That is a true statement. On its own,
Right.
that is a true statement. But yeah, RoboCop is just one of the most perfectly constructed movies, I think, because it does such a great job of like being all that stuff you mentioned, like, action, sci-fi kind of sleaziness, but at the same time it's so beautifully subversive of that idea that like it could work for the dumbest and smartest person in the audience on various different levels. That's the pure beauty of it, is you can enjoy the crass, violent, awful machinations of what Paul Verhoeven's created here, but you can also really appreciate, if you think even slightly about it, about the inherent nuances to what it's saying about this particular era in like Reagan's America, and about the police force, and about corporatization.
The beauty of RoboCop is you can watch it for so many different reasons and appreciate on so many different levels, whether or not is sort of the sharpness of the satirism that's happening, or the just insane over-the-top violence, or the character actor performances, or if you, like I said, into the sleazy sort of stuff with nudity and all that, that's all in there too. There's something for everyone in RoboCop for the most part. Like, I'm not saying like my fucking 70-year-old mother is not going to love RoboCop, but I don't know. She might. Who the hell knows? How does he go pee in that thing?
Also a question if you showed your 5-year-old daughter that's just like, how does he go pee in that thing? See, it's for everyone.
Yeah, it translates. It's just, there's so much here. There's so much to like look at and appreciate and dissect. But also, if you don't want to watch it with that such a critical eye, like you said, you can just shut your brain off and watch it and have fun. The movie works so well in that way to where you could write an essay on it if you really wanted to, or you could sit around and have a couple beers and just have a good time with it. It's just so smart.
And when did you see RoboCop for the first time, Adam? If I recall correctly, you have sort of like the history of this is a movie you watched at far too young an age.
Oh, yeah. So I was about 5 years old, maybe 6 years old when I saw it. I saw this at the theater with my dad and my brother. And we shouldn't have, but my dad wanted to see it, and I know it was after its initial run because it was at like the Dollar Theater. So yeah, I was probably about 5 years old, man. I remember thinking it was awesome. I remember being terrified by it too. Particularly the toxic waste scene, and at 209 scared the shit out of me as a kid. But I just remember being so utterly fascinated by it and thinking it was so cool because my dad sold it to me kind of the way we're selling it right now, where it's a superhero movie. It's a total he's just a superhero. Like, that's what it is. That's what it is. So it sort of took the sting out of it maybe a little bit for me because I was such a comic kid. My dad was such a comic guy, so we grew up around that stuff. So it was kind of like, okay, it's just a really violent adult superhero movie, and that's kind of like I said, I think what took the sting out of it and maybe didn't mentally scar me, or maybe it did. Hell, I don't know.
No, you turned out fine. You're great.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I think it's the government. So I saw it way too young, but I kind of grew up with RoboCop, really. And then I had the, RoboCop versus Terminator comics. I watched the Prime Directives TV show. I had all the toys. I saw 2 and 3 in the theater. It's just, I was in love with this character in this universe. And I still really, truly am. RoboCop is one of those movies to where either A, if I can't figure out something to watch, I'll pop it on, or B, if it's on somewhere else, I will sit down and watch the whole thing from whatever point it's playing. I absolutely love it.
It's interesting because I have a bit more of an inverse thing in that RoboCop was a movie I was aware of throughout most of my life up to a certain point, but I did not see it until actually freshman year of college. It was just a movie that escaped me for so long, and then I finally watched it at that point. And I remember distinctly watching it, and the opening bits with the newscaster stuff are happening. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, this is kind of interesting. I don't know, it feels just kind of like regular news, and I was like, oh, that's what this is. That, the fact that I had seen it at such a long point after, where the stuff that was so satirical and over the top in 1987, 25 years later when I finally watched this movie, I was like, oh, wait, this is actually incredibly smart and decisive for its era in a way that's still very cutting. And from there, the movie's just so enjoyable. What I love about RoboCop so much is, despite it having so many huge lofty themes and also all these different characters it's juggling and big sci-fi ideas, it is still such a lean movie. I keep forgetting every time I put on RoboCop that it's only 103 minutes long. It is such a perfectly compact movie to put all this stuff, and especially center it so wonderfully around our titular character we haven't mentioned is played by Peter Weller. Such a weird choice for this time, where they were trying to get several different people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Rutger Hauer, people who would be more likely to play this role, but the problem was always just, it's somebody who would be too buff in the suit. Paul Verhoeven said, if we put Arnold in a suit like this, he would look like the Michelin Man, which is accurate. You have to get a skinny guy to make that big suit really work as well as it does. And Weller just gives it so much tragedy and beauty into a performance that could have just been done. It's just an Arnold performance, just oh, dead or alive, you're coming with me, all that shit. It could have been just a silly movie, but he gives it so much more earnestness, particularly the whole sequence where he goes back as RoboCop to his house, and he has all these visions back of his family. It's such a beautiful, tragic scene about just the idea of oh, you were once a man and that time is completely gone, your life is gone, your family has completely moved on from you, you are a dead man who is still sentient, you're a Frankenstein monster, basically. This is a great Frankenstein monster movie, which I love, Frankenstein style stories of basically taking a person who was completely dead, bringing them back to life and having them just be an abhorrent weird creature in the middle of this world, where it's a superhero movie inherently, but also it's a movie about how when a superhero is created by these means, it isn't heroic, it's a tragedy, it's a horrible, horrible tragedy. And that makes all the stuff as the movie goes along, where he drops the RoboCop thing and becomes Murphy by the end, weirdly beautifully moving in the middle of this movie where a fucking toxic waste monster shows up.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Weller he's fucking phenomenal in this movie. It's some of the best suit acting, mask acting, period, in film history. I mean, even the scene you were pointing out where he's in his house and he's sort of seen the remnants of things that were maybe left behind when his family moved from the house and things like that, and then he's getting the flashes. He's conveying so much emotion and sadness and confusion with his jaw.
His beautiful, beautiful jaw that got him the job.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But that's all you're seeing it through. And it totally works. You can't see his eyes. You can't see anything. But yet you're oh, fuck. You totally get it that, he's fucked in the head right now. He cannot process really what's going on or what's happened to him or who he used to be. But it's still somehow he knows. It's a wonderful, wonderful performance. And then, like you said, yeah, the dead or alive, you're coming with me. It is a silly sort of 80s movie line, but he has such gravitas to it that it works perfectly. Because I do think if someone like an Arnold said that line, it would be stick around from Commando. It would be just these stupid one-liners, but in this it works perfectly.
Yeah, and Arnold wouldn't be able to convey so much beauty in a bit like him talking to the Nancy Allen character and just saying, like, I can feel my family, but I can't remember them.
Awful.
Like, one of the most heartbreaking fucking lines in any movie, and it's once again in the middle of this movie where he's in a fucking robot suit, and his face is, like, plastered on machine, but you're still, like, so emotionally invested this whole time, because you saw who Murphy was prior to this. That opening sequence where he's just, like, average cop, apparently trying to do his best, and ultimately becomes a Jesus figure in terms of he is horribly murdered in one of the most graphic, awful death scenes I've ever seen in a fucking movie, still to this day, and becomes Jesus. Like, that's, Paul Verhoeven said it many times, he wanted to make this because it felt like a Jesus story, and he ultimately called it, like, the American Jesus, and he's not inaccurate in terms of just, like, this guy who was part of, like, the police force, a system that they established is kind of corrupt even from the start, and has only become more so with OCP taking over. And they just have him realize that just like, oh, you know, when you become swallowed up by the system, and you become a cool robot cyborg guy, like, there's fun to that. Like, you can't have that fun without the horrible bloodshed that takes place. Like, all this excessive violence that happens because of, like, Robocop being a thing is all because just like, yeah, you can have this cool looking, like, robot dude, but guess what? Lives get lost. Horrible, awful things happen. Even the people he saves are traumatized after he saves them. Like, there is an inherent, like, awful horror to Robocop being a thing that exists at all.
Yeah, I mean, to the point where even with the Jesus allegory, it's very much a choice to have it, you know, him walking on water at the end.
Yes.
And yeah, these guys who create him, like the Bob Mortons and, you know, the Dick Jones who are involved in all this stuff, are just, they're awful, horrible pieces of shit. I mean, you know, Bob Morton is a fucking sleazeball, but he's one of the best. It's one of the best sleazeball performances, like, maybe ever.
The late great Miguel Ferrer.
Oh God, he's
wonderful.
so good at it. The movie is populated by horrible characters. I would say Lewis and Murphy are the only two characters in the entire movie that are redeemable. Everyone else is awful. Even, you know, from the CEO, which of course, but, you know, the old man to Jones to you know, everybody who works at OCP, from the scientists to the suits. Well, I guess the police chief too. He's pretty cool, but
But even then, he's a dude who completely thoughtlessly gets rid of that guy's locker's name, and he's like, I don't want to hear anything about striking. Cops don't strike. That's not what you guys do. And even those background guys who are just like, oh, we're kind of fascinated by Robocop, they're the people who fucking gun him down later.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But, you know, I feel like I absolutely have to talk about it, and I've talked about it before. As I'm sure anybody who's been listening to us for a while has gleaned, I'm a big fan of villains in movies. I think in order to care about the hero, or, you know, sort of any of the struggles or horrible shit that's happening, then it has to be perpetrated by an equally interesting, if not more, villain. And this movie has them in spades. I mean, Dick Jones, Bob Morton, but more importantly, like Clarence Boddicker. I mean, what a fucking villain performance from him.
Kurtwood Smith, of course. Red.
Yeah, right. Red Foreman. He's fucking just wonderful in this movie. He's so honest. Like, Kurtwood Smith is not a guy I would ever look at and be like, oh, that guy's fucking scary and tough. But in this, he's scary and tough with these big old aviator glasses and just, you know, balding and everything. But you believe every minute that he's the most dangerous guy in whatever room he's in. He's got some of the most classic lines ever. Like, you did the one, you know, a parody of the, you know, the classic in the beginning, the, you know, Tigers are playing tonight. He's got the, you know, you can keep the gum, which is a great one.
Guns.
Yeah, guns. Yep. You built the fucking thing. Now I gotta deal with it.
I love even some of the nonverbal things he does, like in that scene with like the guns and all that, where he dips his fingers into that guy's wine and just like slurps them up.
It's when he bites the pin out of the grenade.
Yes.
For no reason. You know, just, yeah, shit like that. It makes for such a rounded, great character.
He could have just been enough to be a villain of the movie. Mm-hmm. But the genius in, like you mentioned, having all these other people like Dan O'Herlihy as the old man, yes, or Ronnie Cox as Dick Jones, or even like Bob Morton. Even with Robocop's own personal journey to become Murphy again and get rid of Dick Jones, Like, the beauty of the movie is that he doesn't also take down OCP with him entirely. The sad fact is just like, oh, you can get rid of a Dick Jones, but like the old man's still going to be there. There's going to be some other suit to take his place. Felton Perry's still around, who's also great as like the most banal evil guy with just like, ooh, the baby food. And
I know.
I love particularly his look when it turns out that like Dick Jones is revealed and he has like a, oh no, I can't believe it, you son of a bitch. Like, that's the thing, is every single small sort of like character who is either outright villainous or just part of like a system that benefits them has so many like great distinctive moments. Even the henchman for Clarence Boddicker, you got fucking Ray Wise, who's so fun. You quoted his bit earlier. Or Paul McCrane, especially, is my favorite of those guys, with his weird fucking balding haircut and his shit, but it's like, I like it, or we killed you, all this other stuff. Like, they do such a great job of every single person who is a villain is like weirdly like distinctive, even if they aren't the most well-rounded characters. They're memorable. Even that dude who fucking laughs all the time. There's nothing to that guy's character, but just laughs all the time.
She was sweet. I took her out. Like, you know, that type. Yeah, it's great. It's just, that's the thing about this movie. That's why, again, that's why I love it so much. Is nobody's wasted in this movie. Like, there's not one character on screen, and there's a lot of them. But even with the little that some of them are given to do, the very little, it still works perfectly. Like, you know, yeah, you talk about the guy who laughs, or you talk about Emil, or all these. But the one fucking guy who's in Clarence's group, the Asian guy who's got the headband, you see him for like 2 scenes, and yet he's fucking, you totally believe he's part of that group, that he would be there, with the way he walks down the stairs, with the Uzi, with the, you know, when Clarence is meeting with Sal and all that stuff. Like, it's just, no character is wasted.
All the way down to the dude who appears on a TV screen briefly in the bad sitcom with the, I'll buy that for $1. That guy you remember
I love
so
that
perfectly.
Guy.
Right. And he's not a character, really.
He's nothing. He's just some random guy from some shitty, like, Benny Hill type TV show. Yeah, it's and even the criminal in the beginning who's shooting, the first time Robocop, he's got the gun, he's shooting him, fuck me, like, constant. It's just, it's great. This movie is great. There's no wasted dialogue. There's no wasted moment. You know, I wanted something that goes really fast and has shitty gas
mileage, yes.
Yeah, you know, how about a 5,000 SUX? You know what I mean? It's just, it's fucking perfect, dude.
And shout out also to the field reporter, by the way, who's reporting on that, is played by an actor named Bill Farmer.
Yep.
Who I was shocked to realize that dude is the voice of Goofy. He's been the voice of Goofy since we were kids, basically.
Oh,
from like
I
the
didn't
80s
know.
onward.
I
Right.
didn't know that.
I know, that's weird.
But the board game commercial even that they're playing, where it's like the nuclear holocaust, basically, that they're playing. I mean,
or the SUX
car
commercial with the dinosaur.
With the dinosaur. Yeah, it's fucking just so good and funny. But at the same time, like you said, and it's very true, you watch it now and you're like, oh, this is crazy. We don't. Oh, wait a minute. Like, this is kind of now. This movie can hit on so many expert levels. That's the one thing about this. This is an expertly crafted script, expertly directed and acted. This movie just hits it all in spades.
Like, even down to some of the small things we should mention, like Phil Tippett, who did the stop motion, one of the best out there to ever do it.
Oh, it's
with
great.
Ed 209
Yes.
and the dinosaur, and even Dick Jones at the very end with the weird long arms.
Which is
Stuff
so
like that.
weird. So
Right.
weird.
It is very weird. Or even, like, this movie was nominated for a couple Oscars for, like, Best Sound and Best Editing. Like, it didn't win those awards, but it won one of those rare, like, special achievement Oscars for just the sound effects editing. And it's true, like, all the times that Robocop is walking around, and they have to have, like, the perfect sound effects for, like, the gears and the pump, air pressure and stuff like that for him to move around. It was groundbreaking for that time, and it still, like, works beautifully. Like, that stuff is what sells the fact that fucking Peter Weller said that, like, he originally trained for, like, mime training and stuff like that to be in that suit and was going to make Robocop more, like, Snake-like. But when they got the suit, they realized, like, that's impossible. This is a huge lumbering suit. I can barely fucking move in it. And the genius is, like, he's able to move around when he does because of clever camera angles where you don't see him, like, even get out of the car or shit like that.
You see just his feet, and then it'll cut to his torso.
Right, or you hear the sound effects stuff. Like, that's what I was talking about earlier with, like, the sort of necessity being the mother of invention thing, where, like, you were trying to make Robocop in 1987, so many, like, inherent, like, turmoil with, like, we have to create an iconic superhero and make it work, and we have so many limitations. Like, even, I love the fact that you don't see Robocop in the suit fully until, like, the big reveal shot where everybody sees him, and stuff like that. You just get hints of him, and then you see him in his full glory, and it's amazing to watch because it's so well built up with the clever camera angles and stuff like that. It's such a great way of building up a hero who can be sort of like heroic in a certain way, but ultimately at the same time have so much of the satiric intent we're talking about. It builds a legend and it completely demystifies the legend simultaneously.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's great. And I mean, how often in this movie do you really see Robocop from head to toe? Not often. It's mostly like head to waist, or like just his feet, or just like, his head. Like, they did such a good job of making this work and making it functional in a way. Because I remember even reading that like Weller lost 10 pounds of water weight a day from sweating. Like, it was just impossible. This also has one of my favorite themes to a film ever.
The late, great Basil Pontadorius.
Oh, it's so good. And it sounds like a superhero theme. Like, it fits right in with sort of, Elfman's Batman, or, Williams' Superman theme. Like, it fits perfect right in that mix. And I just absolutely love it. It gets still, for some reason, to this day, well, I guess not for some reason. I just said how much I love it, but I'll just find myself humming it.
And even the way that the rest of the score takes that theme and really like demystifies it. Once again, like you have that big bombastic theme that plays, and then how he deconstructs it with like the scene where he's going around his empty house, and just like the haunting element of that score, where it still is like beautiful and tragic, but at the same time, when the bombast kicks in as it goes along, it's perfect. Like the ending of this movie is, I think, one of the best sort of like actual like ending moments in anything, of just like, nice shooting, son. What's your name? Murphy. The whole character arc just wrapped up beautifully with him just saying Murphy. And I love that, like, Paul Verhoeven said this, like, the best moment of his career was seeing that in a theater with like one of the initial audiences. And after Dan O'Hurley asked that question, before fucking Peter Weller can say the line, the entire audience said Murphy. And that's just like, it's such a rousing fucking awesome bit.
That's
and
pretty cool.
And it's also just a thing where like you would never be able to do an ending like that now, where it's just like immediately cut, that's it, because you don't need any more. There was going to be more dialogue and stuff. There was going to be like an epilogue of sorts, and they realized like, no, we can't. There's no way we can top this. And
you don't need it. Yeah,
it's perfect.
Absolutely,
it's the perfect way to end this movie.
Dick, I am very disappointed.
Or even just the brilliance of just, Dick, you're fired.
Thank you.
Yes, the thank you.
Fucking great.
I'm curious then, Adam, so what do you think makes this as like one of the top echelon examples of like a cinematic superhero movie? What do you think makes this stand out so much from like any of the other attempts? Why do you think this is sort of like the pinnacle of that kind of like original creation of a superhero?
Well, I think for, kind of everything we've touched on, just the brilliance of it all from top to bottom. It gives you a truly like sort of harrowing origin story right in the beginning of the movie, and you get the creation of the superhero, where it's not him in a cave building his own suit, but he's literally being turned into a superhero, and you stick with it, you watch it. By the time you get to him in the police station doing target practice, and his fellow officers are getting their first look, we're getting our first look at him. You're right there the whole time. You feel like you're one of the scientists putting them together, or one of the police officers when they first get a glimpse of them. And it's just, there's so much weight to everything in the movie, be it like literally with the way he moves and the way he walks and the way, his origin story, or the pathos that he's going through.
Or even just the fact that Verhoeven puts you literally in his perspective so much, particularly after the accident.
Quite often.
Like the whole I love that whole sequence where it's just them building Robocop.
Me too.
And you see it from Murphy's head, basically.
These idiot scientists.
Right. One of them kisses him, and like Felton Perry's just like, oh, well, technically he's dead. We can do anything we want with this body.
Like, that guy drives me fucking crazy.
Right, that works for it's a satirical intent, but then later on with someone we've mentioned, but we haven't devoted enough time to, Nancy Allen. Like, does the Murphy, it's you. It's such a perfect moment to like really that you are in his situation. I'm just realizing like, no, you aren't like this robotic being. You were a man.
Right.
That's like really is what kicks off his whole journey after that point to like find out his past.
It's such a great moment, Murphy, it's you, and his lower lip drops a little bit, continues on walking, and then you get the OCP suits chasing after him and cussing her out, and like, what did you say to him? Because they're just trying to hide and protect their investment, basically. And it's just, it opens up so much more to, like you said, the sort of satirical nature of corporate greed and sort of ultimately when does somebody become a product of a company. It's just so expertly done. God damn, I love this movie.
Weirdly, this and Hancock were very appropriate as a double feature because you kind of see, like, they're both kind of dealing with a similar idea of, like, oh, let's, like, give a PR, like, spruce up to a superhero. We saw one bad example of that, and then this is, like, the perfect example. Where once again, like, the biggest worry, honestly, I had going into it, like, any time now in, like, a modern world where we have, like, a lot of issues with police brutality and shit, always my fear is, like, is this going to be the time where, like, some of that stuff, like, makes this a lesser movie? And it doesn't, because it's inherently critical of a police organization, especially one that has far more corporate interests intact, where it's not about, like, an actual individual who wants to do good. It's that person being completely destroyed by a system that doesn't give a shit about actually protecting people, as much as, like, how can we make us look good so we get more taxpayer dollars, basically.
Yeah, 100%.
And, you know, this also kind of sparked a franchise of sorts, with, you mentioned a couple of sequels and comic books and stuff, but most would probably say that those don't really hold up to the original.
I would agree.
Well, and why do you think it necessarily doesn't do that? Like, what do you think is missing from any of these follow-ups that is so pure in this original movie?
Well, the third one, I mean, do we even really need to discuss? I mean, it's not
Maybe
Peter
at
Weller.
some future point. There's a tragedy, really, to that movie.
Yeah, I mean, the third one, I mean, you can barely even count as being part of this. The second one, you know, I do think the second one has some good ideas.
There are bits and pieces, particularly when they're trying to make Robocop 2.
That's the best part of the movie.
That's the best. That guy taking off the helmet, he's got a skeleton.
Yeah, rips his own head off, and you know the one blows its own brains out. Like it's
and more Dan O'Hurley just reacting.
A lot more Dan O'Hurley. Yep. But you're missing a lot of major components that work in this one. You don't have a Dick Jones. You don't have a Bob Morton. You have a Clarence Boddicker with the Kane character with Tom Noonan. But then, you know, he's got the little kid in his gang, and he's got all this and it's a new drug out there. It loses a lot of the satire and goes more for just the action stuff.
Or even the biggest problem with that second movie is the fact that Peter Weller and Nancy Allen are in it, but they are, like, weirdly supporting characters in Robocop 2.
Yeah,
it's such
completely.
Because it's a problem of, like, after the end of this movie, you need to have an actual evolution of Murphy's character where he's like, okay, he's still going to be Robocop, but what does being Robocop mean at this particular point? And in the sequel, it's just like he's going to put the helmet back on. He's going to have, like, a bluer suit.
Yep.
That's
and
it.
The third one, he's going to have a jetpack.
And not be Peter Weller anymore.
And not be Peter Weller, be the guy from Thinner.
Yes, that's true. That's who it is. And you can even, like, they got somebody who could vaguely approximate that jaw, but, like, we can't emphasize enough how, like, that jaw is so crucial to the point where, like, it almost fits in to tie it into the superhero thing more specifically. It's like Batman.
Yeah.
Like, that's 90%, well, not 90, like 85% of the thing is, like, who looks good with, like, most of their face covered up except their jaw. Like, that's
right.
why, you know, the equivalent to, like, Robert Pattinson now, that's much of why it works. It's just him with that cowl. It works perfectly in the same way that a Peter Weller does with this mask on.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And the show, by the way, Prime Directives. Oof. Oof.
Oh, I'm shocked. Does it not have the integrity of this original film or the kids' cartoon from the early 90s?
Yeah, I know. Fucking late 80s, early 90s were fucking crazy. You know, let's make the kids Robocop cartoon and put toys out there. Hey, aliens toys. You know, like,
look. I mean, it's not child-friendly stuff like, you know, Toxic Avenger or Rambo that were also.
Yeah, I know. I was just gonna say Rambo and the Defenders or whatever the fuck it was. We had his group with him. What the fuck? What are we doing? Like, fucking people were crazy back then.
Right, as opposed to now, we don't need to do that because we can have adults buy, like, $500 Hot Toys or, like, whatever, like,
right, exactly.
Like the big exclusive, like, Mezco things or some bullshit.
Right, exactly.
Like, oh, designer toys. I can have that now. While children play with their fucking iPads now.
I'm looking at some of those toys right now, too.
I mean, no judgment here. I'm just looking over my Funko Pop collection.
Well, I have my Hellraiser figures.
It's true. I've seen them.
And I just got a new one.
Oh, boy. How many points of articulation are in that particular anyway.
Well, it's made by NECA, so several.
Of course, equality, of course. All right, Adam, let's wrap up. Final thoughts. Any last things to mention about Robocop?
I just think, like I said, at the start of the conversation, I think it's the best sort of movie to come out of the 80s. It has everything, at least for someone like me, and what I appreciate from 80s movies. I love 80s sci-fi. I love 80s action movies. I love sleazy 80 movies, and this has all of that, but it's also incredibly intelligent too. So it just works on every level for me. That's why it's my all-time favorite movie of the 80s, and in my top, probably, if not top 5, easily in my top 10 favorite movies, period. I just think it's a 5 out of 5 perfect film. I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much perfect as well for all the reasons we said before, but even so many other ones, like the toxic waste death is such a beautiful example of like weird, bizarro 80s shit that could have been cut out of this movie. It works perfectly in there. The club scene where you have Paul Verhoeven randomly like scream in front of your face. It's actually Paul Verhoeven in that one cut.
After jumping around and shit.
Yeah, after Ray Wise like literally gets a like bonk sound effect after he tries to kick him in the crotch. Or even the fact that with the Nancy Allen character, that it's not a romance. Like, something that no other 80s movie would have done around this time. They would have been smooching by the end of that movie. And no, they were just platonic partners who actually want to get shit done, which is so much more interesting and makes the biggest problem I have with Robocop 3 so crucial, that they fucking do some romance bullshit. I fucking hate that so much.
Oh, they do.
They do. That's the greatest sin for the American Jesus of Robocop 3. It's the mortal sin. As opposed to, but this movie, like, it does all that stuff so perfectly. It's so beautifully done. It's like you mentioned, it has, like, so many of, like, the fun, brainless stuff that we enjoy about 80s movies, but also so much more of the inherent beautiful satire that makes it still relevant to this particular day. It's one of the perfect movies. It is definitely one of my rare, like, 5 out of 5s. I don't hand this out very often, but this is one no contest would definitely put up there. And yeah, I would say it's also probably in, like, a top 10, if not at least 20 movies of all time for me, for sure. One I would never get tired of watching. And one I'm glad we discussed here on the show.
Yeah. Don't watch the sequels.
Watch Robocop 2. I think
okay. Yeah, Robocop 2, fine. Do not watch Robocop 3.
Or the remake, which we haven't mentioned either.
Oh, fuck. Bad. To be honest, I completely forgot about it. So that's probably for the best.
But now I think it's best that we move on to our regular segment,
nice.
The Double Review. Yeah, nice.
Nice. Badass segue, bro.
The Robocop of segues, 5 out of 5. Double redo. Double redo. Double redo. Double redo. Double redo.
Double redo.
That works. So the Double Redo is a segment where Adam and I bring up a good and a bad movie related to the topic that we're discussing. So basically, we recommend a good one, and we steer you away from a bad one, related in this case to superheroes originated from the cinema. So I'll start here with my choices. And for my good, I have a movie that was pretty under the radar, not one that a lot of people have heard of, but I think is quite incredible. I have Fast Color, which was an independent movie that came out in 2018 that stars Gugu Mbatha-Raw, who I think is a great actress working right now, deserves better parts than she's getting as of recent, quite frankly. And she basically plays this woman who has been kind of adrift for several years, and at the start of the movie has come back to meet back up with her mother, who has been raising her child. Her daughter and mother have been living off on their own. And the big thing about this world is that certain people do have powers, but the implications of their powers are kept under wraps because they are all constantly in fear of being captured by the government. It feels kind of like a lower budget X-Men movie. So don't go in expecting like a big superhero over-the-top action set-piece kind of thing. It's a really earnest character drama that has moments of like great superhero bits, but it feels just more of like a sci-fi drama about kind of dealing with that and how it fucks people up to certain degrees. And some people, especially with like this, trifecta of like these three, especially women of color, kind of dealing with the fact that like they're being hunted throughout so much of this, and the powers I think are really well implemented. I love, like I said, Guggenbother is so great, but the actress who plays her mother is also incredible. It doesn't feel like too dour for the sake of being dour. It's a really earnest, investing character drama that I would recommend more people see. It's kind of gotten a bit lost in the shuffle. It's very good, very underrated movie. And then my bad pick was a more high-profile movie that came out not too long before Hancock, that I think also has an interesting idea at its core, but I think even bungles it more than Hancock does. I have My Super Ex-Girlfriend, which is sort of like a rom-com satire with a superhero twist, where basically Luke Wilson plays this guy who is kind of like trying to find some kind of romantic connection with somebody, and ends up finding one in Uma Thurman, who, as it turns out, is the secret identity of this female superhero that's been going around saving the day. And it's basically kind of like the fallout of him having to, like, oh, I'm dating a superhero. What are the implications of that? There's so many interesting ideas in that concept. And it just ends up being a really bad rom-com of like 2006 era that has like a lot of like the bad stereotypes. Particularly Rainn Wilson plays the horn dog best friend, who is so unfunny. Anna Faris is really wasted as like the other love interest who isn't super powered to Luke Wilson. And it just has all these weird ideas, especially there's a point where Luke Wilson breaks up with Uma Thurman. And so naturally, like per the title, she's like a jealous, like crazy lady who's going around trying to wreck Luke Wilson's life and like throws sharks in his bed and all this other bullshit. It's such a like weird kind of sexist turn at this concept as well that just like was forgotten for a reason. It's one of Ivan Reitman's last movies, and unfortunately it's not a good note for his career to like be near the end of, and it wastes a lot of talented people, but also has Luke Wilson at the center of it, who has never been my favorite Wilson necessarily. He's been good in supporting parts, but as a lead character, I think he's pretty dull and lifeless and boring, and I don't get why a superhero woman would be that interested in him, because it's just like it's Diet Owen. Owen's way better than this, and that's not saying a lot.
I like Wilson Phillips more than Luke Wilson.
Of course, look, the great songs.
Yeah, dude, bangers. So I've never seen Fast Color. I do remember seeing trailers for it and stuff like that, and I was fascinated by it. But I'd be hard pressed to think of another movie that sort of just came out and was gone faster. Maybe Captive State, but yeah, Fast Color. It's like I completely forgot about it because it just wasn't there. It disappeared. But I definitely want to check it out though, even after you talking about it a little bit more. Like that one definitely is interesting to me. And I don't have much to say about My Super Ex-Girlfriend other than I completely agree with everything you said. I think it's just lousy. Even Uma Thurman, who I don't think is like the greatest actress, even she's completely wasted in this too. Yeah, even when the movie came out, the idea that, he breaks up with her, so she's instantly crazy now, didn't sit with me right then, and it's even worse now, more dated. It's a really, really dumb movie. And not for nothing, I don't know, I can honestly say, other than The Office and maybe Super, Rainn Wilson has not been funny, like in anything. Whatever. I'll give the guy sort of props, I guess, for making Dwight such a lovable character and things like that, but he's just never works for me in pretty much anything else, except for maybe when he's impersonating a moose in House of a Thousand Corpses. It's pretty fun.
I mean, I don't know. I would argue the bigger problem is that he's a very good dramatic actor in certain things. Like Super, I would argue is more of like a dramatic turn.
Yeah.
Or the Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie Hesher, he's very good in as well. I just think the trouble is he's just become attached to Dwight because that's the only thing that's really been super successful for him. So he has to just kind of chase that. I think that's the bigger tragedy of his career, honestly. Also, another person wasted My Super Ex-Girlfriend, Eddie Izzard. One of my favorites.
Well,
just
yeah.
Nothing villain role.
I mean, when has Eddie Izzard not been wasted in mainstream cinema? I mean, she's great and all, but when has she ever been given like a great role? Ever, except maybe as like the disco dancer in Mystery Men. But other than that, like she's never been getting anything good.
I mean, especially in like bigger Hollywood movies. But
yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, right. As opposed to like smaller like British things, or of course the stand-up specials.
Sure.
Fuck it. Cake or Death.
Right. Yeah.
Things ever made. But Adam, you have some choices.
I do. For my good choice, it's a movie I've talked about on friend of the show, Rafe Telsch's podcast. It's one of my favorite movies. It's right up there, sort of with Robocop as far as like sci-fi action weird movie. As far as like my loving of it, I have Dark City, starring Rufus Sewell, with the late fucking great William Hurt, Jennifer Connelly, Kiefer Sutherland, Richard Harris, I think that's his name, isn't it? The guy who played Riff Raff.
No, that's Richard O'Brien.
Okay, yeah, whatever. Richard O'Brien, who's fucking terrifying in it. But yeah, it's just a really dark, weird sci-fi noir film where there's nothing is what it seems. There's things, people pulling the strings behind, and sort of Rufus Sewell's accidentally given sort of the powers of the people who control this world, and it's what he decides to do with them, and ultimately where he's going to take this world at the end of the story. It's a really fucking cool movie. Unlike Hancock, the visual effects still kind of hold up in this one. I mean, they're dated, but they're so cool. Like, it's obviously sets, and I think that's the point. We know it's all, constructed and fake, but the characters living in the environment don't. So when things move around and shift and everything, it's really cool looking. Like, it really, really is solid. And briefly, I have probably one of the most unfortunate sequels ever, possibly. I mean, even more than Robocop 2, and quite possibly more than Robocop 3. I have a sequel to what was a great cinematic superhero movie. I have the sequel to M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable. I have Glass. Such a misuse of pretty much everyone. McAvoy's going for it. Like, he's having fun in it, but it's just too little. And then just the whole creation of this anti-superhero thing that's going on in the world of the movie, and ultimately what happens to our three main characters at the end feels so cheap and rushed. It's a really, really piss poor attempt to capitalize on something that was really successful, and then sort of with the sequel Split, that was semi-successful, but maybe shined a more positive light on such a dwindling career that he was having, M. Night Shyamalan. For him to follow that up with this is just oof. Thank God Old was decent, because if not, to me this would have been it. Like, I would have been completely done with Shyamalan. I think Glass is absolutely a bore fest of a movie.
Yeah, I've seen both of yours. I like Dark City. I actually hadn't seen it until you did that episode of Ray Tells You So. Have not seen this, where you talked about it. And I dig Dark City quite a bit. I know we got a lot of comparisons to, it came out right before The Matrix, and then a lot of people post The Matrix being very successful were just like, oh, what about Dark City? It kind of did some similar things. And even some of the sets that you mentioned show up in The Matrix, particularly during the opening, like the rooftops are the same sets from Dark City that show up in The Matrix. And I find the movie definitely interesting. I think my biggest problem is that, like, I'm definitely not as huge on the lead, that is Rufus Sewell, right? Is like the main lead of it. Right. Yeah. I'm not as huge on him. I think a lot of the other stuff around him is fascinating. But I still think, like, it's a very interesting, creative, cool little sci-fi movie that I wouldn't even thought as like a superhero movie, but until you mentioned it. But yeah, it's like, that makes sense in the same way that The Matrix would also be, I think, applicable.
I think so.
Like that.
Yeah.
And then Glass, I do agree that I'm not huge on Glass, but I've at least grown to respect Glass for being like a movie that I think is so super intentional in terms of a lot of the subversive things it's doing with, like, the ending of that movie. Like, it's very clearly, it's a movie about kind of expectations and coming up to the ultimate point of realizing, like, oh yeah, nothing we do could actually satisfy a, Unbreakable coming back, and then a Split, like the James McAvoy character actually fighting each other. It's very much, I think, M. Night trying to comment on, like, the modern superhero film in a way that I don't think is wholly successful, but I find far too fascinating to dismiss, like, so abruptly. If nothing else, I think, like, of his failures, I find it far more fascinating than, say, like, A Lady in the Water, or some of his other, like, lesser, just unwatchable movies. I find Glass interesting, if not good, necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't know, though, dude. Honestly, I don't think Shyamalan was really thinking that. Had that much sort of, maybe subtext to it when he made it. I really don't think so. I just think it goes to show that, maybe his best days are over. I mean, in all honesty, like Old is fun, but it's not great. It's still got this stupid twist at the end. It's just, maybe it was a subversion of, I'm not going to give you this crazy big twist at the end, but then he kind of went ahead and did it anyways with the Sarah Paulson character and all that stuff. So I don't know. I don't think he was really thinking and leaning into it that much.
The biggest thing with M. Night that you can say is that I don't think he ever, underthinks a concept. If anything, the bigger problem is that he overthinks a concept. I think that's the thing, is that I think a lot of that intent is there. I would just argue maybe the execution isn't as, successful as I think it wants it to be. So I think all of that is inherent to Glass. I think that's very much all the build-up about particularly the big opening of the fucking tower is exactly that. They are completely setting up the whole movie about there's gonna be a massive fight at this fucking tower. And it's nope, it's in a fucking parking lot. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have these people fucking fight in the parking lot with nothing. I think that's very inherent to the narrative. I think Glass is such a fascinating movie I would love to discuss in full on this show. It is, there's so much interesting.
There might be a veto on that one. That's my superpower.
And my superpower is to pick something else and then make you do Glass after you veto that. Who knows? Who knows what might happen? That's the fun with the vetoes. We'll get to that in a second, folks. But let's go ahead and repeat our titles for people out there in case they missed them. My good one was Fast Color, and my bad one was My Super Ex-Girlfriend.
And my good was Dark City, and my bad was Glass.
Yes, and please submit your own double redo titles to us on our socials or our email, as we'll detail in a bit. And stay tuned for us to reveal that, and also our picks for next week. First, we want to thank some people like Chris Oliver for the intro and outro used in our show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Christian Thor Lally for our artwork. Follow him at Night of Water. That's Night with a K, _of_water for more of his great stuff. And thanks to our supporters on Patreon. Patreon.com/GEDVpod, where for just $1 a month, you all get access to bonus podcasts that we do, and also get to vote in polls to pick topics and movies that we cover for the show. And we should mention a few things. One, the audio commentary for Punisher Warzone is out there as this is being released. So, after you saw Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, listen to us talk in person from back when we did the 200 episode trip, talking about that particular weird Marvel movie that'll never happen again. And also, we just want to mention a bit of housekeeping that On the Edge of Relevance is a show where we cover modern movies that are usually released in theaters or digitally. And we've mentioned in the past about The Northman being one that we were going to do. We posted this on the Patreon, but just as a reminder here on the show, that one is going to be delayed a bit until it can be released digitally, and we can both watch it because we've had some trouble with both of us getting to the theater to see that movie. So that will be coming, just in a bit more time than we anticipated.
It's me. I didn't go to the theater.
Well, I wanted to cover your ass a bit, but sure.
I don't give a shit. I manage a fucking bar, and I got a 6-year-old. Sometimes I can't make it.
Right. And we also just want to thank, we should mention, along with being the 4-year anniversary of the show in general, it is the 2-year anniversary of the Patreon. So we want to thank all of you edgelords out there who've been contributing, money to us, even if it was just for a month or for this whole time. We really appreciate every dollar helps us out. We really appreciate when you buy that for $1.
Hey, that's not becoming a thing. That's not becoming a thing. But yeah, definitely thank all you guys. I'm even going to say thank you, Christian Alvarez. I think I'm going to stop. I might stop telling you to fuck off because I think I'm going to go back and tell Rafe Telch to fuck himself. Hey, buddy, you're back in the swing of things. Hey.
Reprising old bits. That's what anniversaries are for.
Yep.
Yes. Old tired bits that have become so tired by this point. And for more tired bits, find us on Twitter and Facebook at DEDBpod. And also you can submit feedback to us and stuff like double redo choices over at doubleedgedoublebill@gmail.com, all spelled out. And for me, you can find me on places like Twitter and letterboxes at NotTheWho'sTommy. And I also do some writing on marianithomas.wordpress.com and at film-cred.com, where I'll just shout this out one more time because it has come out now as of the day that we're recording this episode. My article, Sam Raimi and the Blockbusters of Madness, over at Film Cred, where, given Doctor Strange just came out, I went through the sort of blockbuster trajectory of Sam Raimi's career. I'm proud of that piece, and I hope you all read it and share it around.
Yeah, or don't. You can find me on Instagram at Atom or Adam. That's ATOM_OR_ADAM. Or you can find me on Letterboxd at Schwanson. That's SCHWANDTSON. And if you're feeling froggy, you can look me up on Facebook. I'll add you if you tell me you're a listener of the show.
Yeah, we should mention you have defunct your Twitter. You got out once the Elon Musk of it all became a thing. I'm unfortunately still tied to that as of yet.
Yeah,
until,
I'm out.
Yeah, I don't blame you. You rarely used it, even. Like, the very times you've had a Twitter, it's been very sparse.
Yeah, it's literally just been to share show stuff, basically.
Pretty much.
Yep.
But for more of our show, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on Talk Film Society, why not listen to all the other great shows on the network? And you can also dig into our archives and our Podbean main feed for 4 years worth of content. So much that you can listen to.
There's a lot.
Yes,
There's a lot.
If you can't, support us on the Patreon, the completely free way to help us out is to rate, review, or simply share the show around, because that gives us more visibility.
Yeah, so I don't know. Just fucking do it.
Yes, and before we do the picking, Adam, I just want to say sincerely, we've been doing this for 4 years, through many trials and tribulations, but genuinely, I'm going to say it's been an honor and a privilege, and I'm going to just tuck you in and get you a warm glass of milk. There you go. Good night, sweet prince.
Sorry, what happened? What? What day is it? Am I still recording? Shit. No, yeah, dude, for sure. This is something I look forward to. It's been such a weird couple years. It's been for everybody, and everything's so topsy-turvy and sort of all over the place. It was nice to have sort of a constant thing that was consistent and didn't change. So yeah, and for that alone, I thank you as well.
Notice the past tense. Adam, are you leaving the show now? What's happening?
That being said, everyone,
go fuck yourselves.
Everyone, go fuck yourself and listen to my new podcast, Talking Tucci.
Are you just talking about that new Italy show? He's gonna find Italy, Adam? Will
Yeah.
he find Italy?
I hope so, because if not, he's pretty fucking stupid.
It looks like a boot, dumbass.
My kid can find it on a globe, and she's dumb.
Well, now, Adam, it is time we did our picking for next week's episode. We do this, of course, at the end of every episode, where we each have either 2 good or 2 bad choices. We switch up on the quality for that. Each of us has assigned a number between 1 and 10 for both of our choices, and the other person will pick a number between 1 and 10, which gets us our good and our bad feature for the following week. But given this is an anniversary episode, we are implementing back in something we started last anniversary, the Godfather rule, where basically now, in addition to doing that picking, Adam and I each have a single veto in our back pocket, which we have to use by the time of next year's anniversary. So next time in May, we have to have used this veto, or else it just disappears out of our pockets. So it's a use it or lose it kind of thing, where if one of us hears the other's choice, whether good or bad, that we pick with a number, and the other person's like, oh, hey, we're going to be doing this particular choice, the other person can say, actually, I'll take the cannoli. And thus, that choice is gone, and we have to go with whatever other choice remains. This is only for, ones that we have chosen here. None of the Patreon polls are going to be eligible for something like that. So, for example, when we did this last time, Adam used his veto when we were going to be doing our picking for our 2021 wrap-up episode on the 2021 version of Cinderella, and we got Me, You, Madness instead, the other choice I had. On the opposite end of things, for the Bruce Willis episode, where Adam had his 2 good choices, and he ended up having 16 blocks is the one I got. I vetoed that one, and we got 12 monkeys for that particular episode.
That's a better one.
Right, so, it could go either way.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Adam, even before we do the picking here, now that you've had the Godfather rule once, how are you going to go into this next year, knowing you have that in your back pocket? Have you changed your strategy, how you're going to implement it?
Nope. If it's something I really don't want to fucking do, I'm just not going to Godfather. Veto.
Okay, well, do you still at least have that trepidation knowing that I could easily have that other choice be something even worse based on your last experience with it?
Yes and no, because the last choice was definitely probably a worse movie than one I got stuck with, but I'd argue there was probably way more to talk about. So I think it actually worked out in our favor.
Yeah, but I will at least say that there were definitely some times when after you had that happen to you, where you tried to do that on me, and I could tell you were just like, oh, fuck, he didn't fall for it. Yeah, where it's just like, oh, well, I'm not going to take canola, and you're like, fuck, fine. I guess we'll go with this other choice I thought you were going to veto.
Oh, as far as coming after you and getting you to use your,
yes.
I'm coming after your fucking ass.
Well, I mean, you can buy me dinner first, but we have to do.
I already have. Damn
well,
it.
that's true. You have. It was a wonderful lunch, I believe, that you bought me. But anyway,
lunch/dinner.
It was. I don't know. What's the brunch equivalent of between dinner and lunch? What is that?
Dinner?
Drunch.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll go with that. But Adam, we're going to be doing our picking for this particular one coming up here, which is we're repeating another topic we haven't done in a bit, but also it's interesting. This is us revisiting a topic where you weren't on the first episode for. One of the few episodes you missed was our first A24 episode, and we're doing A24 again because Alex Garland's Men is coming out. And we're both very curious about that movie. And, A24 there's a lot of potential there. And I'm excited to have you on for one of those now. Hopefully. Knock on wood.
Yeah, right. Jesus. I'll be there. And at least in spirit. A24, I mean, it's become a powerhouse of, independent film. And, I'd argue it's one of the more consistent of the sort of independent movie houses that are out there. I mean, there's some that might not be great, but I'd argue for everyone that might not be great, there's 5 that are.
Yes, and you have the 2 good this time for that.
Uh-huh.
So you have the embarrassment of riches of sorts, and I have the 2 bad choices. We've assigned them numbers between 1 and 10, and we're going to end up picking a number between 1 and 10 for each other's choices, unless that gets us our good and our bad feature. So, Adam, for your 2 good choices and your embarrassment of riches, I'm going to go with number 3.
All right. At number 2, I have a movie that came out in 2019. I haven't seen it. This was a hard one for me to choose between these because I was thinking, how bad do I want to cry? So I went with the 2019 comedy drama starring Awkwafina, The Farewell.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Not taking the cannoli on that. Beautiful movie. Great.
I haven't seen it.
Wonderful choice. All right. What was your other choice?
Great. My other choice at number 10 on the dot is the 2016 sort of comedy starring Colin Farrell, The Lobster.
Okay, Yorgos Lanthimos movie. Very interesting movie. I wouldn't mind talking about that either, but The Farewell, I think, is the better movie. And I can't wait to talk about it. Great.
All right. Oh, boy. All right, now so you're too bad.
Yes.
I'm going number 9.
Okay. At number 10, I have a movie that was so extremely, divisive when it came out. To the point where I remember seeing this with some friends, and they loathed it entirely. It is definitely, sort of the classic example to me of, an A24 movie that was advertised to be, a spooky horror movie, and then ended up quite not being that. And I have mixed thoughts on it myself. I have It Comes at Night.
I kind of love that movie.
Okay, I mean, I know that movie has its defenders. I'll be very curious. I don't hate it, but I'll be very curious to revisit it here. But at number 2, I have what I would argue is a much worse movie, objectively. I have Slice, the horror comedy.
Oh God, no! Oh God, I would have lost my fucking veto right away. First episode of the year. That's a terrible film.
Very bad film. Yeah, well, a lot of talented people like Chance the Rapper, Paul Scheer, lots of funny Zazie Beetz. Very poor utilization of all of them. Very bad.
Yes. Awful film.
Yes. But yeah, so It Comes at Night and The Farewell. Very, very curious to talk about that next time. Well, Adam, now that we've done the picking and everything, it's time to end this very special episode. I think the only way we know how. By saying, nice podcasting, son. What's your name?
Adam?
It just Adam shows up as a logo, but it's like in MS Paint, and there's a question mark at the end.